Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Warnida Abu Bakar. I will present to you a study on cost control in building construction project. The first one is the introduction. In the introduction, we will define the concept of cost management in the construction project, which is cost estimation, cost budgeting, and cost control. And the second one is we will describe the cost control process, the application, tool, and technique used in the cost control in construction project. And the third one, we are focusing on the case study of cost control practices implemented by construction company, which is in Singapore, UK, and Thailand. Then we go to background of study. In the background of study, we will describe one by one the three elements of cost management in construction project. In general, we will see what is cost estimation, what is cost budgeting, and what is cost control. But in this assignment, we are focusing on cost control only, cost control in building construction project. The first one is cost estimation. The cost estimation is basically how much money that you need to develop a new project, or we can call it a forecast cost. Usually it happens in the early stage of the project initiation, and this cost estimation is usually based on the previous cost project. And the second one is cost budgeting. Cost budgeting, you can simply say that the total cost of the building project. It is the amount of money that you calculate from the work process in the building works. So that you can simply say that the total amount of money that we derive from the work activities is the cost budget for this project. The third element is cost control. This cost control is about manage and control the allocation budget or project cost. In order to control and manage the project cost, we need a certain method and techniques to ensure that this cost building does not exceed the agreed cost limit, so that the main objective is to earn maximum profit to the company, to avoid the stakeholders suffer from the losses, and to achieve the standard quality that has been agreed, and also the time frame of the project. In order to manage and control the cost project, cost control practice needs to be efficient. There are various tools and techniques that have been developed to help most of the construction company to control their project costs. So the most common practices that defined by Huang and Zemplick, there are work breakdown structure, cost code, or we can call it cost breakdown structure, earned value method, cost value reconciliation, overall profit or loss calculation, profit or loss on each contract at the valuation date calculation, actual versus forecast calculation, unit costing, and standard costing. And then we will describe more on work breakdown structure, cost breakdown structure, and earned value method, because these three methods are the most common practices of cost control that used by most of the construction companies. So the first one is a work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure is a task or activities in a family tree. It is a systematic structure and have their own level of details, each activity in the construction project. So the cost control will depend on the work that defined in the task or activity in the WBS, so that this work and cost can be controlled concurrently. The second one is cost code, or we call it cost breakdown structure. This cost breakdown structure must be designed based on the task and activity in the work breakdown structure. So the level of detail of cost breakdown structure must be the same with the task and activity defined in the work breakdown structure. The only difference is the cost breakdown structure, it has accounting code in it, whereas the WBS structure has only task and activity defined. So this accounting code must be aligned with the whatever accounting system that used by the company so that the cost control practice efficiently applied. Another common cost control practices is an earned value method. This method is also called as a performance measurement tools. So this earned value method is a method used to identify how much work has been done over how much cost that has been expended. It's used for a reporting purpose. It's so that the report of the status of the project can be done in terms of cost as the work progress and at a particular given time. It also can identify the cost status before the finish of the work so that whatever corrective action can be identified and can be taken as the progress work. Another example of cost control practices implemented by construction companies, they are project cost value reconciliation, overall profit or loss calculation, profit or loss on each contract at the valuation date calculation, actual versus forecast calculation, unit costing, and standard costing. These cost control practices are not the common practice that used by the most of common construction companies. Some construction companies, they are using this method, but most of the construction companies, they are not using these control practices. So this study is to identify, the first one is the practice of cost control implemented by construction company. The second one, the technique and the software used. And the third one is the other element that associate with the practices of cost control from the case study on the research paper. So in this assignment, I will present 3 case study of cost control practices in building construction project. The first case study is cost control practices in mega project in Singapore. This study was conducted by Huang ETL 2020. It is this year. So on cost control practices in mega project in Singapore. So in this study, Huang investigated the prevalence of cost overrun in mega project in Singapore. And then the second one is the cost control practice, that tools and technique used in the construction company. And then the third one is it identify the key knowledge area that associate on cost control practices. The methodology used is interview and questionnaire. And then the respondent is from 32 companies that are expert in the building construction project in Singapore. First step is to verify the presence of overrun costs in building construction project. And then the second one is to verify the cost control function, cost control goals, and techniques used by this company, which these function, tools, and techniques were identified earlier in the literature. So in this study, Huang identified that 44.22 of mega project and 38.28 of general project in Singapore experience cost overrun. So it means that the practices of cost control by most of the company in Singapore is still inadequate. The second finding of cost control practices by construction company in Singapore, the result shows that these control practices mainly used for monitoring the status of the project, to eliminate risk, to achieve the best value for money to the client, and to maintain the project costs. And then Huang also identified the tools and the technique used for cost control by construction company in Singapore. There are S-curve forecasting technique, and then the project management software, which has the control function system in that software, and then the WBS, work breakdown structure. The next finding is the key knowledge area that associate with the cost control practice. The first one is procurement management, communication management, risk management, time management, scope management, human resource management, and quality management. And then the case study 2, the cost control practices in construction project in the United Kingdom. So this study was conducted by Fermi in 2016. This study is focused on the practice of cost control in building construction project in UK. The constraint of the implementation of cost control practices and its mitigation measures. So the methodology used is interview and questionnaires. The respondent is from the 250 construction companies in United Kingdom. The respondents are among directors, senior management, manager, contract manager, construction manager, project manager, and quantity surveyors. From the investigation, the most common technique used for project cost control in UK are project cost value reconciliation, overall profit or loss calculation, profit or loss on each contract at valuation date calculation, and actual versus forecast reconciliation. And the common software used for cost control by contractors and consultant companies in UK, they use in-house system, Microsoft Project, Project Costing System, and Asta Power Project. The second finding is the factor that hinder the effectiveness of cost control implementation by construction companies in UK are the most common factor. The first one is design changes during the project implementation. The second one is the risk or the uncertainty things that happen during the project implementation, and then the inaccurate evaluation of project time, and then the non-performance of contractor and suppliers, and then the lastly is the complexity of the works, which can be the factor that hinder the effectiveness of cost control implementation. So in this study, Fermi recommended that some of the mitigation measures to ensure the cost control in construction project are well executed. Because of the design change during the construction period is the main reason of ineffective cost control practices, then it suggests that whatever the design change during the construction period must have a very good reason on it, and it suggests that the design change must be always within the cost project. Other than that, it suggests that to having a proper project management plan, risk management plan, and also this plan must be collaborate with the site management office so that the input are more relevant and more accurate. It's also lastly about competency of the project management team. It suggests that the project management team must be well trained to ensure that the cost control practices can be well implemented. The case study number 3 is about the assessment of cost control system in Thailand construction companies. This study is to identify the cost control system used by most of the construction company in Thailand, and then the second one is the cost control function and the cost control techniques associated with the cost control practices used. The methodology is the comparative study, and then the respondent is from 100 construction companies in Thailand. From these 100, 5 companies initiate their development plan, and then from these 5 companies, 4 are proceed to the next step of this research conduct. So this is the comparative study from 4 construction companies in Thailand. So the most common cost control technique used from these 4 companies are work breakdown structure, cost breakdown structure, and earned value concept. And then the second finding is the usage of cost control practices by these 4 companies. Firstly is cost estimating, and then the budgeting, monitoring, analyzing, reporting, corrective acting, and project post-evaluating. So from these 3 case studies that have been presented, the discussion and recommendation is made. So from the 3 case study that has been presented, it can be understood that the success of any building construction project is depend on the success of manage and control its cost, time and quality. The poor cost control practice by the construction companies are the main reason of cost overrun. And this cost overrun is because the design changes during the project implementation. To overcome the issue, the implementation of tool and technique in cost control practices in construction projects are recommended. There are such as work breakdown structure, cost breakdown structure, and value method, S-curve, cost value reconciliation, overall cost or loss calculation. And then the second one is recommended to use the software in cost control practices that will be much easier, practical and efficient. Example of software that can be used in cost control practice are Microsoft Project, Project Costing System, Asta Power Project, Microsoft Excel, and maybe some of the company they need to develop their own software to make it easier, make it more practical, and make it more efficient associated with their own building project. So the study also identified the purpose of cost control practices in building construction project. So they are monitoring project status, they are to achieve value for money to the client, to achieve maximum profit to the company, and then to eliminate waste, for cost estimating, for cost budgeting, and cost monitoring for new project development. The study also discovered the problem is not actually from the tools, technique, or the software used, but rather the lack of knowledge of the technique and poor management of the cost control. So that it is recommended that the responsible professional from the project management team must master the 7 knowledge areas of project management and also well trained in the usage of project management tools such as work breakdown structure, cost breakdown structure, and value method, S-curve, and so on. Other than that, it is recommended to use building information technology, BIM, which by using BIM, it can enhance cost control in the construction project. BIM technology can control the progress work so that the uncertain costs are well controlled. By using BIM, cost control will be much effective and the rate of success project will be much higher. So lastly is the conclusion. In the conclusion, the objective of this study has been achieved. The practices of cost control implemented by the construction companies are identified. It's also discovered the common tools, technique, and the software used by most of the construction companies that were interviewed. It also discussed the factors that prevent the cost control from being successfully implemented, and also the effect of failure has been discussed. And then the control measure to reduce the poor cost control practice also have been discussed so that the construction company has no longer suffered from the profit loss. It is also encouraged to the all construction company, especially to the project managers, to implement the best practice of project management so that to get the best practice of cost control, so that the maximum profit and value for money to the project can be attained. Next is my list of references when doing this assignment. Thank you.